everybody, DeathsStalker here. Another weekend and another Grand Prix, and this was the French Grand Prix at Le Mans. The actual official name was right there. It was a very interesting weekend, but we have to go back and start on Friday. Now for Friday, it was wet. In the morning it was full-blown rain, and in the afternoon it was still damp. So it was not exactly called excellent weather for riding Grand Prix bikes, and it showed just by the number of people that decided to hit the tarmac, and there was quite a few. Several of them were actually Moto2 riders. They seem to want to have the most spectacular crashes. And one of the guys, MotoGP, was good enough to actually put the video up on it. It's actually the current points leader in Moto2. So I'll put a link to that crash. It was a highside. It was vicious, absolutely vicious. But apparently he was okay, other than just being a little bit sore. This shows you that the protective equipment they wear nowadays is 1,000 times better than the stuff I used to wear. Okay, just trying to... Oh, people taking pictures. Okay. Just so you know, this is the first time I've been up the road since they've completely redid it, so I'm just sort of checking things out. So for Saturday, for qualifying, it was a nice day, but very chilly. Not quite as chilly it is here right now, but I believe the high temperature they got for the day was 17 Celsius, which is, I think it's in the low 60s, and not great for racing. But the interesting part was the Yamahas were all just smoking. They were going really fast, and they looked good to just lock out the entire front row. And then Danilo Petrucci, who's not been having what I would call a stellar season at all. It didn't help that Ducati told him very early in the season that he's not on the team next year, which kind of, for a rider it sucks, but to be told before you even had a chance to prove yourself is a good way of destroying someone's confidence. And this year's Ducati isn't all that good, but Danilo, they made some changes on his bike. I heard they just lowered it by 15 millimeters, which doesn't sound like a lot, but apparently that was enough to make the bike actually handle really well. And Danilo and Jack Miller and Dolby were all fighting for the front row, much to the surprise of the Yamahas in qualifying. Now Fabio, of course, put in a stellar lap. I believe he set a new lap record. I can't remember if it was or not. But Fabio ended up in the front row with Jack Miller and Danilo Petrucci. So that was sort of a surprise when everyone was expecting all Yamaha front row. Now, fast forward to Sunday. We had rain. It was predicting, you know, sunshine with no rain for the Sunday, but in the end they got rain, and it happened just as the Moto3 race was wrapping up. It actually started to rain, so they actually had to declare a wet race. Now the guys had come out on slicks, so they had to immediately switch the bikes over to rain settings, and changing the rain settings is not like just throwing a switch. Suspension adjustments have to be changed. Software mapping for the engine and the traction control and whatnot has to be changed. Now that's just an upload. It's not like somebody sitting there picking and choosing check boxes. And then of course you have to fit, you know, the rain tires, and the brakes probably have to be adjusted too. So it's not like a 10-second job. And for whatever reason, they were given like barely 5 minutes to get it done. And everyone was rushing around, and they got out for the start. Now, of course, the big question was, with the Ducatis, with their hole shot device, everyone figured they'd be first into the first turn. Fabio, even though we had the Yamaha on the the pole. It's just that this is a long straightaway, and more importantly, it's also a fast first turn. So it's not like a lot of tracks where you go, you know, hard into the first corner, then you have to hit the brakes. This corner, you actually usually from a start you just carry your speed right through. So they had the start, and Fabio got an okay start, but the Ducatis were like all over everybody. And then to everyone's surprise, Cal Crutchlow on the Honda, who's racing the first race this season where he's been pretty well almost fully fit, comes right around the outside of everybody and is almost first into the first turn. And that's the first time we've seen a Honda near the front since the first race of the season, before Mark had his crash. Now, Maverick Vinales didn't have a great start, but nowhere near as bad as Valentino Rossi. Rossi took off, got into the first turn, and there's a change. Like, the first turn is a right-hand turn, and then you switch over for a left for the next turn. And Rossi with the pack, you know, switched over to the left side and lost the rear end and crashed out in the second turn. And I believe it's like the 5th race now this season that Rossi's had a DNF. Now, some of them were not his fault, but many of them, you know, would be tagged rider error, which is not looking good for his final season on the factory Yamaha team. That crash sort of caused a bunch of people to sort of scramble to not run over him, and John Muir, who was not in a good start position anyways, was pushed towards the back. Maverick ended up getting pushed back quite a bit, and a bunch of other people did too. Now, the Yamahas were all sort of falling back in the wet conditions. They just didn't seem to have a good wet setup. And one person who actually seemed to have a really good wet setup and was actually moving well was Alex Rins. He had started 16th, and he was cutting his way up towards the front, and he'd get there. But more on that later. The other person who really surprised everyone was Alex Marquez. On the Friday, he was out in the wet on the Honda, and he was one of the fastest people. And today, in the wet, he started 18th because he still hasn't figured out how to get a good qualifying lap to get into qualifying 2. He was cutting through the field, actually traveling about a half a second faster than everyone else. That's how good he was going in the wet, on the Honda even. So it was quite interesting to see what's going on. Fabio ended up dropping further and further and further behind, and at one point was almost out of the points. And he would benefit, you know, very happily from several riders who would crash out at various points of the race. So he actually left the race leading the championship, and actually even gained a few points on his nearest competitors. Now, the interesting thing was the 3 Ducatis were just smoking away, and then eventually Alex Rin, who had started 16, managed to catch them up, which was, you know, quite impressive considering he was quite a ways back. And Alex was fighting with Jack Miller, and they were battling back and forth. Good race. And then all of a sudden Jack pulled off to the one side, put his hand up, and then took an exit road off the track. Looked like he had an engine failure or something along that lines, which you feel sorry for him because he had the pace to win the race. So unfortunately Jack, just not having any luck this year. Now, while this is going on, Alex Marquez and Paul Espargo were slowly catching up to the lead group, and it was getting to look like they were going to catch him before the racing was over. Now, Alex Rins, he was all over Dovey, and at one point he actually tried to outbrake Dovey and Danilo. I think he actually misjudged his braking point and sort of messed it all up, causing everybody to sort of close their throttle and take evasive action, which let Alex Marquez and Aleix Espargo Pol Espargo to get even closer. And then a couple laps later, there was no question that Alex Rins had the pace to probably win the race, and he was coming to one corner and just lost the front end, and off he went into the gravel. So now Dovey was running third, but now he had Alex Marquez all over his rear end, and Alex tried a couple times to get him, and Dovey was able to fight him off, but eventually Alex got around him and just left him in the dirt. And you could tell what had happened was Dovey's rear tire, you know, it was a rain tire, had basically been all used up. When he got on the gas going down the straightaways, you could see the tire spinning way faster than the bike was moving. So his tire was just chewed up completely. And Pol Espargo also passed Dovey. So Dovey had gone from you know, it was running third, he now was running fourth. So Dovey ended up having Miguel Oliveira all over his back tire, and the two of them were sort of fighting for position. But unfortunately, Oliveira had also used his tire up, so Dovey was actually able to cross the finish line in fourth place. Pol Espargo wasn't quite able to catch Alex Marquez, and Alex Marquez got his first MotoGP podium, finishing second, bringing the first podium for Repsol Honda this season, and put on an absolutely stellar race. But more importantly, Danilo Petrucci, who basically knows his career with Ducati has come to an end at the end of the season, won his second ever Grand Prix. And he won one last year in Italy, and now he's won another one here. And next year he is going off to race in the KTM garage in MotoGP. And everyone was just absolutely thrilled with Danilo winning, because everyone loves him. He's like the nicest guy around. He's always pleasant, he's got a smile, and everyone knows that this season for him with Ducati has just been absolutely horrible. So everyone was just absolutely thrilled. It was a great race. I couldn't even look away from the screen for a minute, because every time I tried to, something happened. So it was a really good race. Now next weekend they're going to Aragon for a couple races. I believe they said they got 5 races left in the season. And of course the big rumor is, will Marc Marquez reappear? He hasn't said, Honda hasn't said, who knows? So it was just things to come to. So anyways, hope you enjoyed this. Gotta get off this road because it's really windy and cold. Hard to believe it was 20 something degrees here yesterday, and it's 14 today. Anyways, DeathsStalker signing off.